Hi everybody, I am Howard and this is Otter's Corner. The last couple of videos we've talked about some important things. One was living below your means and saving and investing money. The other was talking a little bit about how much do I need to have before I retire. Today I want to take it one step further. I'm going to talk about my own personal portfolio, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. So first let me say this. I didn't come to these decisions on my own. I relied on experts along with the knowledge and information I've acquired over my lifetime. The first couple things I want to talk about are books that I think are very important for people to read. Here's the first one, is How Much Can I Spend in Retirement by Pfau. Pfau is probably the foremost expert on retirement savings and withdrawal. He's somebody I think you should follow. He's got YouTube videos, he's got all sorts of interviews by other people, he's got several books out. He is a big advocate of insurance and annuities and annuitizing some of your income streams. Maybe talk about that some other time. I think it's an important issue for people to look at. The other important book, and this is the one that probably influenced me the most, it's called Living Off Your Money by McClung. And most of what I'm about to show you that I developed is based off of this. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So let's get into it. And again, personally, this is how I do it. I'm not telling you this is how you must do it. This is what I decided to do. We're going to look at my investment categories, and basically what I'm going to talk about is everything beyond my cash. I personally have cash, and when I say cash, most of it sits in a money market, earning over 5% at Fidelity. Some tiny fraction of it is in a checking account, maybe 1.5 months worth of what I need to spend. So what I'm talking about is everything beyond my cash. And that is basically bonds and stocks. You could do commodities, gold, whatever else you want to do. This is what I decided to do and I think is best for me. So if we look at it very quickly, here's the category of stock investments I have. We're talking large cap growth, U.S. large cap growth, which is 7.3%, large cap value, 15.4%. And I want to get a little bit more granular here. Most of my stock investments are in index ETFs, most of them. A long time ago, I had a lot of individual large cap stocks. I thought I was a stock picker. I thought I knew what I was doing. Index funds are the way to go. I'm not saying I failed, but index funds are the way to go. So I sold off most of those stocks. However, I kept two that I'm calling growth stocks. And those two stocks are Home Depot and Apple. I've done extremely well at Apple. I bought it 6 years ago or 7 years ago. Coincidentally, same time Berkshire Hathaway started buying it. So I've made many times my money. I've sold off half of it because it was becoming too large of a part of my portfolio. But when I say growth stocks, 7.3%, that's Home Depot and Apple. Large cap value, 15%. I'm a very strong advocate of value stocks. A lot of the research shows that value stocks do very well as opposed to growth in certain markets. Doesn't always hold true. You're going to pick out some time periods where that doesn't happen. I know that, I understand it. I personally just like value stocks for the long run, so I tilt that way in my portfolio. Again, I have growth, but I also have value. U.S. small cap. A lot of the research is showing that your returns overall will be enhanced by owning some small cap stocks. And again, Bill Bengen found this when he came back and redid his study about withdrawal rates, and he went from 4% to about 4.7% when you add small cap value stocks into the mix. So again, my U.S. small cap value is about 10.7%. And by the way, these are the targets. This is what I set up when I retired about 1.5 years ago. 7%, 7.3, 16, 15.4. You see they're all very close to that. So they're holding near there. Bonds have somewhat outperformed stocks in my portfolio in that time. But that's another issue. So I have some REITs, it was a target of 5, they're at 3.9, they've done pretty poorly, mostly because of rising interest rates. But that is a small part, and I think that's important. international large cap value, international small cap value, and emerging markets, which obviously are international or foreign stocks. So you can see I have about 17% of my portfolio in international stocks. I think it's a very important part of the portfolio. Some people disagree with that. Some people think you can get US stocks that have exposure to foreign markets, but I think when you own the foreign stocks, you get a different kind of exposure to those countries rather than just the stocks in doing business in those countries. So again, if you want it, that's yours. If not, do it another way. And bonds make up 45.5% of my portfolio, which was a target of 45. So you can see I'm pretty close to where my targets were. And let me talk a little bit about bonds. Back in the early 80s, bonds started about a 35-year run of great returns. Interest rates went almost straight down over that period. For over 30 years, interest rates fell. So bonds in value rose. So bond funds did fairly well over that period. You could pick just about any bond fund with a dart and you would have done well. Well, I saw that, and eventually, when we hit 2008, we hit the housing crisis, the mortgage crisis, interest rates went to zero. The Fed took their interest rates to zero. So bonds really had nowhere else to go unless we went to negative rates, and I didn't see that happening. So instead of buying bond funds, I did a bond ladder, which meant bought individual bonds, held them to maturity, or I'm holding them to maturity, and I built a ladder. I bought some exposures out a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5, all the way up to, I think at the time, about 10 years. So that as those bonds matured, I could either reinvest them or use that cash for what I needed to spend. So now, what happened is, actually a few years ago, what happened is iShares came out with what they call iBonds. And these were packages of bonds they bought for particular years. So there's an iBond investment grade 2030 package of bonds. And what that is they went out and they bought hundreds of bonds that mature in 2030. They hold those bonds in one package, and at the end of 2030, they return all the money to you as those bonds mature. Meanwhile, along the way, you get the interest payments those bonds send out, or you can reinvest the interest back into the fund, as it were. But there was no interest rate risk here. So even as interest rates went up and bonds fell, yeah, the value of the fund fell, but if you hold it to maturity, it comes right back to what the bonds were at par, which is $1,000 per bond, minus any defaults. I'm not aware of any defaults in those portfolios right now. Could happen, but may not. So I have a ladder of those also. I have 2023 up until about 2035 right now. So I'm not going to see any great growth in those bonds. In actuality, I'll see it on paper as rates may start to fall now. But now that I think interest rates are about where they're going to be, and maybe a little higher, a little lower, I think it's a good time to get back into bond funds. If you're an investor in bond funds, or if you're holding off, now may be the time to start moving back into bond funds. Because I think rates will either hold steady or start falling, and because you're looking at high yields on them now, I think a 5 to 10% return for bond funds over the next 7-10 years is reasonable. Again, my personal prediction, so we'll see how that plays out. So here again, 45% in bonds, about 55% in stocks. These are spread about in my different portfolios. I have a brokerage account. I have our IRA, which is mostly 401ks that I rolled over. I have a Roth IRA that I did invest. And we'll talk about Roth versus regular retirement fund, tax-deferred retirement funds later. That's a little bit of a longer topic. I have an HSA. I have a checking account, which is, again, minuscule. It's less than 1% of my portfolio, less than half of 1% of my entire holdings. Only put enough in your checking account to get you through a month and a half. Keep some other cash in a money market at an investment company. I've said it before, don't invest your money with banks. You'll get the lowest returns there. So here's what I did, okay? And the way I withdraw my money is I have that 2.5 years of cash right now. As these bonds mature and they pay out, I add that to my cash. As they pay off interest, I add that to my cash. So even as I'm spending cash, that 2.5 years doesn't really go down, but it keeps feeding cash into the pot for me to spend. Now, if I run out of cash and I need money from this portfolio, my first source of that money would be selling some of those bonds. My second source, and again, I do not rebalance annually. Okay, I never rebalance. The only time I take money out of stocks is when they've had an outsized growth year. So if we're looking at a 20% to 25% increase in stocks, I would then rebalance my stocks into bonds and take whatever I need out of bonds into cash. The way I do it however you want. Tell me how you do it. So please, if you like this video, subscribe, click that thumbs up for a like, and tell me in the comments, what are you doing? What do you think of what I'm doing? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good or is it bad? How would you do it? What have you read? What have you looked at? What influences you? So that's it for today. Have a great rest of the day. See you later. Thanks.